Despite being 67 years old and almost definitely innocent of her charges, Margaret de la Pole was the victim of the most brutal execution to ever occur here inside the Tower of London. It's clear there was minimal preparations for her execution. No scaffold had been built, and a young, inexperienced executioner was tasked with taking her life, as the man who normally did the executions wasn't at the tower. There's a rumour that Margaret tried to run around to avoid the executioner, but this is likely fake as it wasn't discussed in records written at the time. But the execution was definitely botched. On the first blow, the executioner missed her neck, instead hitting her shoulder. The second strike hit the back of her skull. In total, it took 11 hits before she was beheaded. Despite being arrested 2 years earlier, Margaret still hadn't had a trial, and so when she was told she was going to be executed only 1 hour before it happened, she must have been incredibly shocked. It's thought that some of the reason her execution came out of nowhere was because Henry VIII may have been trying to punish her son, Cardinal Reginald, who was in exile in Italy. Reginald had openly criticised Henry's break from the Roman Catholic Church and had links to plots that had aimed to overthrow Henry. Reginald was the third of 5 children of Margaret's that survived to adulthood. When her husband died, she struggled to financially support 5 children, to the point she had to give up one of her sons to the church. This boy was Reginald, who would go on to work his way up the church hierarchy and become the last Catholic Archbishop of Canterbury, as well as a cardinal. Understandably, being the only son given up to the church affected him deeply, expressing as an adult that he felt he had been abandoned by his mother Margaret. During her captivity, right up until the very end, Margaret professed her innocence of anything treasonous. The only evidence of her supposed treason was a robe depicting Catholic imagery that modern historians believe was a faked piece of evidence, as it was conveniently found 6 months after a detailed search of her belongings had already occurred. Margaret's life was rocky from the start to the very end. Born 14th of August 1473, she was the eldest to survive childhood of her parents George the Duke of Clarence and Isabel Neville. Her father George was the 4th in line to the throne as the younger brother to Edward IV and older brother to Richard III. Margaret's mother died when she was only 3 years old, and she and her younger brother Edward were both orphaned less than 2 years later when their father was executed for treason. This painting is potentially of Margaret later in life, and on her wrist we can see a barrel. This is thought to be in reference to the rumour that her father was executed by being drowned in a barrel of sweet wine. Throughout her life, Margaret would fall in and out of favour with the different kings. Under her uncle Richard III's reign, she and her brother were looked after well. When Henry VII became king, her brother was sent to the Tower of London and later executed, while Margaret was married off to Richard de la Pole, a relative of Henry VII. When Catherine of Aragon and Arthur married, Margaret was sent to serve Catherine of Aragon as a lady-in-waiting, which was the start of a close friendship between the two of them. Margaret would remain faithful to Catherine throughout her life, risking her own safety by defending Catherine in her divorce from Henry VIII, and later looking after Catherine's daughter Mary as her governess. When Henry stripped Mary of her princess title, Margaret even asked to look after Mary for free, which Henry rejected, calling her a fool of no experience. After her brutal execution, Margaret was buried in the Chapel Royal, which is within the walls of the Tower of London,